Welcome
Hey,
back.
y'all. Welcome in. It is Sunday. There is no football today for the Saints, but we're going to talk about Saints football because it happened yesterday. I'm Jeff Nowak over here. We're not live yet, but this is the podcast Inside Black and Gold. Steve is a bit jet lagged. He had that puddle jumper flight from Houston. He got back today. How you doing, Steve?
Got a power nap in and drinking some coffee, so I'm back online. And we're not talking about practice today. We're talking about an actual game.
Yeah, Allen Iverson would be proud. So what? Well, I said puddle jumper, but I don't think that technically qualifies because there was no puddle that you jumped. You just took a really short flight from Houston to New Orleans.
Yeah, it's really easy once you go through all the security BS to get through to the gate and everything. But you get on the plane, take off, and 45 minutes later you're touching down. It's you don't even have time for any kind of beverage service.
Right. It's like one of those flights where by the time they get like there's no cruise. It's like you're going up and then you're coming down. Like the plane flattens out for like 5 minutes at maximum.
Yeah, and we had quite the entertaining group of stewardesses on our. Is that the proper term?
Flight attendants, Steve. Flight attendants.
I know. Sorry for the flight home. They were very entertaining and sarcastic, so I appreciated that. One of the ladies said, "All these seats are the same. Get your butts in them so we can take off."
There you go. Yeah. So we haven't started the podcast yet. We're kind of just vamping so that people can find us. We're going to get going here in a minute. We're going to get into the segment that we have named today, and we may very well rename once we decide it's not coming off the way we want, but it's going to be the studs and duds segment. We're going to pick a stud and we're going to pick a dud, and then we're going to pick a few honorable mention names from the game yesterday. We've already kind of decided them, but we're excited. We have a lot of locker room audio that we're going to throw your way. Then we're going to kind of re-rank the running back battle after what we saw yesterday, which I think we got a lot of answers in terms of how things are standing right now. And then our final segment is going to be me kind of galaxy braining my way into explaining why Trevor Penning did not play nearly as bad as you might think he did. Because when I woke up this morning, I was ready to rewatch that game and be like, man, Trevor, what is going on? But I mean, the plays that I expected to be bad were bad, and the plays that I didn't watch because there was nothing to watch, those are the plays where no one gets by the offensive tackle. I thought he held up pretty good. So we're going to get into a lot of that. We're going to throw some stats at you, but yeah. So how you feeling, Steve? You got your coffee? You ready to go?
Yeah, definitely fired up, and actually going to be heading out to Green Bay tomorrow for those joint sessions. So it's like come back home, throw it back in a bigger suitcase, and then take off again.
Yeah. When do you fly out?
Tomorrow, Monday around, I think it's like a 4:00 flight, and then we go to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Green Bay. So we don't get into like 9 something at night.
Yeah, I was kind of bummed when I found out I wasn't going to Green Bay or to Houston, but then I was like, you know what? It's going to be kind of nice to have a couple of days not having to go to camp practice. I can sleep in. But it's kind of weird because effectively because of the fact they're doing the joint practices, local training camp is pretty much over. Like there's only a few more days that I'll end up even going out there before they get into kind of regular season mode. That's kind of weird. It doesn't feel like it's been going on that long, but because the last 2 years you haven't had the joint practices.
And just in general, I feel we've talked about it. They've seemed very mild, these practices, from a standpoint of we seem to be waiting more time for players at the podium than we do watching the actual practice. And I'm appreciative of the weather gods pretty much cooperating with us this camp. There wasn't a day that I felt was so sweltering that I was dying out there. I might have said it before. I thought mini camp and OTAs were definitely much more harsh.
Yeah, it helps when it rains like virtually every day. Right?
Every day. Yeah.
But all right, so we're going to get going here in a second. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, hot takes, questions about Steve's camera angle, throw them in the chat. We'll get to them, assuming they're relevant and you're not being mean, which it's hard to not be mean to Ian Book these days, but we're going to try not to be too mean.
Maybe.
But we are going to talk about Ian Book, and we did talk to Ian Book. So we have some sound from him, and we're going to get into that. But so Steve, without further ado, you want to lead us in here? I know you have a ton of energy, so Maybe we might have to do this more than once.
I don't think so. I think we'll be pretty good with it, hopefully.
Well, we'll see. I'll let you know if we do.
All right, Saints fans, welcome into Inside Black and Gold. We are back at it. Steve Geller, Jeff Nowak, bringing you the latest on your favorite team that just took on their first preseason game against the Houston Texans. We, I think, expected a lot of the things we did see, and then there was a few unexpected twists in that first preseason game. But for the most part, a lot of things went the way I at least thought they would with the first teamers that were out there. We saw them move the ball down the field wonderfully right off the bat. And I thought that the first team defense too was phenomenal without so many of the starters even present. It was pretty impressive that the Texans didn't even have a first down until the second quarter.
Right. And they weren't even that close to it. Yeah, I think it's easy to kind of come away from that and feel like it was a negative result because of the way it ended, because of the 17-13 scoreline, because the Texans managed to pull off a final, game-winning drive in a game that didn't matter against the backups to some cases the backups.
Some guys just arrived on the team.
It's always the first couple series that are far more important. And you look at it this way, would you rather have the first team dominate and then lose at the end, or have your first team do absolutely nothing like the Texans did and then sneak out a win to trick fans who didn't watch into thinking it was a good result? Because I know which one I would prefer, and I would prefer to be on the Saints end of it. And we're going to get into a lot of that. Steve and I are going to go through our studs and our duds and our honorable mentions from the game that was played. We're going to kind of re-rank the RB3 battle because we got a lot of new information on that. Headlined by Dwayne Washington being the guy, apparently. And then we're going to close out with me explaining why I don't think Trevor Penning was that bad. I was able to rewatch the game this morning. And when I went into it, I was thinking, man, Trevor really struggled. Then I rewatched it and I was like, okay, those 3 or 4 plays that we were brought to our attention were very obvious. But the rest of it, I don't think it was that bad. So we're going to get into a lot of that in the final segment. But without further ado, our first stud, Steve, who is it?
I mean, it's got to be, for me, the red rifle, the man under center to start the game. Andy Dalton came out firing, looking fantastic. 5 for 5, 51 yards, led the team down, getting that touchdown with Dwayne Washington. And he just looked confident, very smooth, like we've seen him in camp practice, as a guy that, I don't know, it seems him and Pete Carmichael Jr., they might have that connection that we laughed about all the time that Breeze and Sean Payton had together. Really, Andy Dalton has gelled well and assimilated himself here, where it seems like he's been in this offense for a while now. And I don't know if he just, obviously being in Chicago the year before, and then with the Dallas Cowboys, obviously before that, with all those years in Cincinnati, he must maybe appreciates the offensive line he has now. But I definitely super uber confident in the Saints backup quarterback situation. I'm not saying that Dalton's a guy that's going to supplant Jameis Winston. We're not talking about any of that still, obviously. But if there is that break in case of glass emergency situation, we saw that Dalton can come in and seamlessly guide this offense, and that's huge, obviously.
He's just so steady, and that's really all you can hope for at the backup quarterback position, right? And I think the question is, okay, so if you end up in the same situation you were in last year, not that, you will, but just kind of theorizing a scenario that Andy Dalton could have a major impact. If Jameis goes down and all of a sudden you need a quarterback, and do you have a 5-game losing streak in the middle of the season the way you did last year? I don't think so. And, even if you go 1-4 in that stretch, you're in the playoffs, right? So it's the margin is that slim when it comes down to it. And I think that definitely Andy really kind of showed on that opening drive that he can be a capable quarterback leading this Saints roster. And, he was not just one drive and out. They wanted to see 10 to 15 plays from him. That's what Dennis Allen said after the game. And it just so happened that he led a 10-play scoring drive, and they were like, okay, that's all we need to see. And it's like, throw Ian in there, and we kind of went from there. And that was the only touchdown we saw. It probably wasn't the only touchdown they should have gotten, but there was a lot of turnovers. And that's why when you kind of look at the result and you look at how things went and you say, man, they turned the ball over a lot. Well, none of that was on the first team offense. They allowed a few big plays at the end. None of that was on the first, second, or maybe even third team defense. They shut them out in the second half until that final drive. So no, I think you're right on with that. And I was impressed. Like, I came into this offseason, he's got Dalton over here, Roadhouse. And that might be I was skeptical of like what Andy had left in the tank, but I think that he's proved me wrong. Not that I think he should be the starting quarterback or even wanted to be the starting quarterback, but I think that it was a solid signing this offseason that I really questioned at the time.
Yeah, and I kind of laughed when our very own Bobby Hebert went on air and mentioned that if Jameis wasn't able to play, he still believed that the Saints could win 11 games with Andy Dalton under center, and I might start believing that a little bit.
Like, if Jameis didn't play at all?
Right.
Oh, I don't know about that.
He said coupled with the Saints defense, along with what, Andy Dalton's experience and, confidence under center, that he still thought that this team could be an 11-win team.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a preseason game, but it seemed very validating last night.
A little bit. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
Exactly.
If he can come in and win one game in relief, I would be thrilled. And that's really all you can hope for from a backup quarterback. And I think that's what the Saints didn't get last year. They didn't get that one game in relief. You had Trevor come on in relief and win games, which, as a backup, that is really your primary role. But you didn't get any of those. You had 4 opportunities for him to do it. He didn't get it done. And that's what you need to avoid if that happens again this year. But
what's funny too is we talk about the first team, obviously offense and defense, and there was obviously so many guys that weren't even dressed last night. All your big names didn't play. Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, over on defense, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, Marshawn Lattimore. The list goes on when you're talking about first team offense and defense. It was just funny to me seeing so many of those guys just in their sweats, and Alvin Kamara really took on a great role of being kind of like a coach on the field for that first team offense when they were out there.
Yeah, it was basically the 1.5 team. Like, it wasn't the first team. It was kind of somewhere in between first and second. But that's why the preseason is valuable, because it allows guys to kind of step into roles. And my stud is going to be one of those guys. You saw him on the first play of the game. You saw him intercepting a pass. You saw him getting in the backfield, tackle for loss. I think he led the team in tackles with 6. It's going to be Chase. I just show up in ball Hansen. I mean, where has he been? He has not been on the roster. We recognize the name, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy. But he was all up in the running back's grill. I think it was Marlon Mack on that first play. He just came in on a blitz and he just took him off his feet before he even found where he was. And that's just an ability that you want to see out of a depth linebacker, right? You want to see a guy who's just going to get up there and make a play, who's not intimidated by that moment. And he did, and he seized it. And, he had that really nice interception in the first half. I think it was a tip by Eric Wilson. He deserves some credit there. Another linebacker who I thought played pretty well. But yeah, I mean, Chase, for a guy who has struggled to stay healthy, for a guy who, just hasn't really had his moment yet in the NFL, I thought that was a really, really cool thing to see in a game where he really needed to stand up, and he did.
Yeah, and that's a position that's definitely the weak spot, if you would say, on the Saints defense, is depth at linebacker. Other than Demario Davis, there's still question marks. We have Pete Werner, who's nursing that groin injury. I didn't see him at all yesterday. I'm curious, who's going to step up and be that guy in that linebacking core. We saw Chase Hansen. You mentioned Eric Wilson, who I think, that was a huge tip by him to create that play for the defense. And with Hansen, a fast guy, great closing speed. You mentioned that run stuff. I think it was like a 2 or 3 yard loss on Mac. and yeah, hasn't been someone that has been at camp the whole time. Was just showed up, and a plug and play was pretty impressive. Obviously, been here before, so he's been around the team and he knows this defense as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's a veteran per se. He's been in the league forever. I can't remember if he's out of Wisconsin. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy who you want to be having in the locker room. They brought him back for a reason. They had him here last year, and I thought he had his moments in the last preseason, and he couldn't stay healthy. So it's cool to see him back. And we're gonna move on here because we've already kind of waxed poetic pretty long about these guys, about our studs. And we're gonna move on to the duds. And we're gonna introduce Steve's dud with his words on his own performance after the game, and here it is.
It was a slow start, but just felt good to be out there. Preseason, you're gonna make mistakes. That's what Coach said, and he just wanted to see everybody fight. I thought we fought hard as an offense. When you make mistakes, it's about rebounding. We ran the ball really, really well, in my opinion. You get rid of those turnovers that should never happen with QB center exchange, that's on me, and then the second pass a little high, tip ball, that's just football. But that's the preseason too, so we're gonna get those fixed and we'll get it working.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely took the easy out in this segment with picking the stud as the quarterback and the other dud as the other quarterback. Yeah, Ian Book was a rough night, and I wonder if it was something where the nerves got the best of him for the most part. That high pass to a guy that's 6'4", 6'5", Juwan Johnson.
He's 6'4", and he got up. He jumped. He was off the ground. I mean, Zion Williamson would have had a hard time snaring that ball, and you cannot say a little high. That ball was sailed. If he was throwing to Deontay Harris, it would have been a clean 5 feet over his head.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the instances too. He held on to the ball a lot. 5 sacks for Book. That wasn't
entirely on him. I don't want to call him out for all the sacks. There were a few ugly moments from the offensive line, but he did hold the ball too long at times. I agree.
Yeah, and just obviously the inaccuracy. And at this point, I think it's clear for me at least that say if Jameis isn't playing and then you have Andy Dalton who gets hurt, who are you going to put at quarterback? Because 10 out of 10 times I'm going to do Taysom over Ian Book.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way because at least you can get that power run game. And the thing is, if he had defenders hanging all over him on that play and he kind of airmailed it, that's one thing. He was throwing out of the cleanest pocket you saw all night. He had a wide open receiver. Juwan Johnson was standing alone. I tweeted a couple frames from the game on my Twitter account at Jeff_Nowak this morning. It's like, man, it's actually more painful to watch again because you see how just that should be pitch and catch, right? He was brought in and people kind of wanted to say, yeah, he's kind of in that Breeze mold where he's 6 feet tall and he's supposed to be super accurate and he can move around. Well, Drew Brees wouldn't have stayed in the NFL very long if he couldn't hit wide open receivers. There was a play later in the game where Kirk Merritt was coming through on a slant and against off coverage. And if he puts the ball on him, we have seen Kirk Merritt, what he can do in the open field when he gets the ball in his hands. He's a running back, but the ball was left clean behind him. So he had to kind of reverse and catch it. And so he lost all of his momentum, and it ended up being, it was a reception. It was a 3-yard game, but it could have been one of those plays you look at and like, okay, yeah, some positive momentum, but the throw was so off that it didn't have a chance. It was the play right before Tony Jones had that beast mode run, if you remember, where he broke 4 tackles. So you kind of forget about it, but that was a first down that only got 3 yards and should have gotten at least 7-8. And maybe been a big gain, maybe been the Kirk Merritt moment of the day, and it wasn't. So yeah, I mean, I was incredibly disappointed, but I did think he settled in. I think he works the right way. I think he goes about the game the right way. I think he's a good guy to have in the locker room, but it's really hard for me to see a roster spot for him.
Do you think height has anything to do with it? Does he have problems seeing over defenders?
I think it has something to do with the trajectory on his throws. I don't think he has an issue seeing the routes because he was throwing to the right reads. I mean, he saw Juwan. That wasn't the issue. He just didn't get the ball anywhere near where it needed to be. And that might be a height thing. But again, he was 4 yards back from the nearest lineman. He should be able to make that throw. And if you can't, you're not an NFL quarterback. And right now, it's hard to see him as an NFL quarterback. Right now, it's hard to see him as an NFL backup. And it's harsh, but I think it's the reality. But the good news for Ian is he's going to get his chances. He's not getting cut. I saw a few people saying, "Oh, he's going to get cut." He's not getting cut. No. He'll be one of the final cuts, I think, but he's not getting cut before that final cut down because you need quarterbacks in the preseason. You're not going to run Jameis and Andy out there. They're guys you need. So he's going to end up getting a lot of these reps. I don't know why KJ Costello was completely out of the equation, but
I was wondering that too. I didn't know, maybe it was just too soon for him with the team to get in there. But I thought at least to hand the ball off, he would be able to. He would come in in the fourth quarter with a little bit, but maybe because the game was still, within grasp, and you're trying to keep Book out there in a competitive situation. But I'm interested to see maybe in this Packers game what Costello could do, and if that pushes Ian anymore, because he is in desperate need of a bounce back game here against Green Bay.
Yeah, we have a few questions. Yeah, why did Ian Book play the entire game? And he really did. I mean, Andy Dalton got the first series. Ian was in there the rest of the way, which is rare to see in the preseason. But I think it's a combination of KJ Costello got there on Thursday, right? I mean, he had 2 days to learn the offense or whatever offense you're going to run. That's not an ideal scenario. I think that they brought him in just in case maybe, Ian Book goes down with an injury and you don't want to send Andy Dalton back in there. You have someone you can throw in. I just don't think with 2 days to kind of learn the checks and the reads, that's a tough sell. And you don't want a guy, these are moments where you want to go out there and like showcase your skill set. And I do think that throwing him out there, not knowing the offense at all, would be doing him a disservice, because no tape is better than bad tape. And if you're putting AJ in a position where he's going to go out there and just look awful, then that's not good for him, right? So I think they were doing him more of a favor by not throwing him out there, but I would expect to see him, assuming Jameis is not in play, I would expect to see him against the Packers, at least like in the fourth quarter. There was no reason to leave Ian in there unless you just did not intend to play KJ at all. And I think that's what was going on. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. It felt like at least at some point in the fourth quarter, even, that Costello was going to come in, but that wasn't the case. And quite a different dynamic in quarterback size there too. Costello's a much bigger dude.
Yeah, and he's got a strong arm. I am interested to see him. I don't think he's going to make the roster, but I am interested to see what he has to offer. Because I think, this is a moment for him. You want to see him get a chance in the preseason because he's a USFL guy. There's a lot of USFL guys. Brian Allen had his moment, and then he let it flounder away. But he got that highlight. He'll always have that highlight of that interception in the Saints jersey, and he will shut the tape off right before the next drive when he got I think it was John Stinstrom, which the broadcast crew for that game was fantastic. It was Joel Myers, Jonathan Vilma, and John Stinchcomb, and his analysis of that play was like, yeah, he was in man coverage, and then about halfway through, he decided, you know what, I don't want to play man coverage anymore. I'm gonna stop. But he's also not my dud, so I don't want to tease the wrong guy.
I will say, my wife even texted me the Saints could cut him now. That's how
Brian
angry
Allen?
she was. Yes,
Or Ian Book.
Brian Allen.
Well, he's been on the team for 2 days, so
that's exactly right.
But I think you got to let a guy get a paycheck before you fire him.
She felt he could stay in Houston. She didn't even want to see him come home.
See, but that's the thing. The game doesn't matter, guys. The game didn't matter. Okay, moving on to a guy who should matter, but he kind of let me down there a little bit. My dud, Traquan, got to catch that Smith. And I'm actually going to be softer on Traquan than I know a lot of people have been, because I thought that Trey started well. He caught a third down conversion from Andy Dalton on that first drive that kept it going. It was a nice little stick route that he kind of just broke off, sat in the space, and caught a nice 15-yard pass. But then he was kind of absent. One thing that I think is concerning if you're Traquan is you're out there for 26 snaps. Marquez Callaway only played 15. Both of those guys only had one catch, but you kind of now feel a little more confident in Marquez in terms of making the roster because, he got taken out of the game. That kind of, you can kind of infer the value placed on a player by how quickly they come out in the preseason. And I think that's an indicator. Where he really let me down was when he had a chance to make Ian Book look a lot better than he did in the end. And that was that, a perfect ball. If you want to complain about Ian Book all you want, that's fine. But he threw a touchdown pass. It just was not caught because it was a beautiful ball right over the shoulder in the back corner of the end zone. Traquan got both hands on it. I thought at first maybe it got knocked away. It did not. I rewatched that this morning pretty closely. He just didn't catch it. And that's just not the tape you want to put out there. But I will say that Traquan, if he makes the roster, and I think he still has a pretty good chance to make the roster, he's going to do it by doing things that other people don't want to do, which is block. On that Ian Book interception, he's the guy who got the tackle, and that's the type of stuff that he's going to do, that the dirty work, and that's going to help him make the roster, but I do think that now kind of as you look at it, I went into it thinking, okay, maybe Marquez Callaway is on the bubble for a guy like Dejon Dixon, Kirk Merritt, who might pass by him and take that spot. I now think that that's Traquan on that final bubble spot, and he's going to have to show up against the Packers and the Chargers, I think.
Yeah, to me, I've been pretty hard on Traquan consistently, and I was actually came away impressed with a pretty decent training camp I thought he was having.
He's healthy.
And, yeah, exactly. And then you just see that inconsistency at wide receiver where there's games that he does disappear. He's had some success, obviously, with this team, but just a guy that he's never able to string it together game to game kind of basis. And I was that was the sideline, Saints sideline, where he dropped that ball in the end zone, and I thought the defender might have had a hand on his arm. I'd have to go. No, not at all. But I did see the ball just basically go through his hands.
Yeah, and he laid on the ground afterward. You could tell he knew it. He didn't feel like that was
visibly, distraught about it.
Yeah, he didn't get up, looking for a flag. He knew that he should have caught that, and it was like, right. Yeah, and for if you're the person that really, really wanted the Saints to win that game, that touchdown probably wins the game for them if they catches it, because they know that's the difference. But okay, let's move on. Let's stop being mean to Traquan. Let's talk about a few good things before we go to break here. Let's get some honorable mentions. My first one, and I tweeted about this today as well, Malcolm Roach. If you saw, I don't know, I can't remember if it was the second drive or the third drive. I believe it was the same drive that Paulson Debo drew the offensive pass interference, which he should have been the stud. I don't know why we forgot him, but Paulson Debo was fantastic. But Malcolm Roach, it was a screen pass. It was a 3rd and 12, and he's coming from the other side of where the screen is being run. The screen's being run away from him. You don't even block that guy because you're like, he can't make a play. This is a 290-pound man. He's not chasing down a running back. Well, believe you me, he chased that man down. I have not seen a giant person run that fast since I watched Happy Gilmore and Shooter McGavin tried to run off with Happy's jacket. It was that moment. It was like, that belongs to Mr. Gilmore. And it was boom. He tackled him at like the 29. Sorry if that was a loud clap. I think when they landed, he was at the 33. It was insane. A 290-pound man should not be able to sprint that fast and dive that far. And he stopped it. He forced a punt. I don't know if he would have made it to the first down, but he would have had a chance. That must have felt like, I can't even imagine what that running back must have thought was happening when he was getting, dive bombed by a 300-pound defensive tackle 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. But it must have felt like getting hit by a truck. So good on Malcolm. That type of hustle is hard to teach. It's either you do it or you don't, and he's doing it.
And I gotta say, my honorable mention though was a negative. My honorable mention was the Saints pass rush. I thought, I expected a lot more. I know the defense. Would that be
dishonorable?
Dishonorable mention. There you go. The defense was obviously phenomenal. That first team defense, but when we saw guys like Peyton Turner, Carl Granderson playing so late in the game, I was waiting. I was waiting for that big hit on the quarterback, and just nobody was getting home. And I thought, I didn't know, I was curious of why the pass rush wasn't able to get more sacks. I think they only had one on the night.
Yeah, I thought, Malcolm gets an honorable mention for that play, but I thought the pass rush was suspect, and then the run defense was even more suspect. Dameon Pierce looked like a star, and I don't know if he is, but that's something that the team's going to have to clean up. But again, this is a situation where you don't want to overreact. You were playing without Cam Jordan, without David Onyemata, probably the two best run defenders on the defense. So, I don't want to overreact to what we saw, but, those depth defensive tackles, they're going to be there primarily to play the run. Their saying is, stop the run and then you have fun, right? That's actually what they say. It sounds corny, but it's what they say. And they didn't do it, so if you're looking for some criticism, if you're looking for some teaching points in the tape, I think it's going to come in how they handled the run game.
I will give a shout out. I thought Tano Passanio was a guy that at least was able to apply some pressure and make the quarterback uncomfortable. But yeah, like I said, to me, I wanted to see more of those flashes that we've seen from Peyton Turner and Carl Granderson, especially since they were still around so late in the game.
They played a lot more than I expected. They played a lot more than I expected.
The Texans, second and third team guys.
Yeah, and I think I lost my train of thought here. But yeah, I think the linebackers had a big role in stopping the run in this game. And that's, if your linebackers are the ones playing the run, that means the defensive tackles aren't doing their job. But one more honorable mention before we get out here for this segment, and that's going to be Dejon Dixon, wide receiver, Nicholls State, 3 passes, I think 33 yards receiving. He was the team leader in receptions. He had a really, really impressive third down conversion. I think it was 3rd and 13. He caught a pass for 17 yards from Ian Book. And I said this going in, and I think this is why we're being a little too critical of Traquan, is there has been a clear connection between Ian Book and Dejon Dixon in camp. So it's not a surprise to me that they look good in concert with each other when they're out there. I went through my notes. I don't think I wrote down a single 16-10 anywhere. So, I think that's something that you kind of lose perspective on, where, if that's Andy Dalton, Traquan might be a lot more involved. So, but that's a good thing for Dejon, because Ian Book's going to get his chances, and he's going to be able to go out there and shine and really prove his worth. And if he doesn't prove it well enough for the Saints, try to prove it well enough for 31 other teams that might be wanting to claim him. So good on him. I thought Dejon and Kirk Merritt had a few nice plays too. I don't want to forget about him and Destrehan Kid.
And I'll sneak another honorable mention. I guess all 3 running backs I thought did pretty decent, except obviously the all 4 running backs. I you know what? I still consider, though, Dwayne Washington is a guy that's on the roster no matter, I don't want to say no matter what, but I feel like
he's on the roster. I agree with you there, but he thinks he can be a running back.
So, yeah, I'm really talking about that competition between the 3, because, Tony Jones Jr., Abram Smith, and Azigbo don't have their spots locked in, whereas, Washington's space is definitely there with the special teams role. But that's something that Ian Book said too. All the guys ran hard. Unfortunate end to Abram Smith. His night with that.
Dead.
No, but it was fumbling at the goal line is never is a good way to get yourself not on the team.
No question. Steve got a little ahead of himself, because that is our next segment. We are going to re-rank the RB3 race based on what we saw in the preseason opener. And it's going to be a whole lot of that. So stick around. All right. I'm going to go to a commercial because I need to go to the bathroom.
I love the Saints should sign Sue.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. All right. Also, Tristan Wirfs, someone's talking about. But anyway, there you go. Okay, commercial break over. We're back. Yeah. So again, thanks for everyone who's in here. We got about 60 people watching, which I appreciate. Make sure to throw your comments, questions. We're going to get to a lot of them. If not in this segment, in the next one, because that's going to be kind of our, catch-all with everything when I try to convince y'all that you're overreacting about Trevor Penning. But for this one, let's talk about running backs. If there was any one of the 4 running backs, even though Steve only wants to talk about 3, any of the 4 running backs who really stood out to you, let me know in the comments. I'm curious to kind of get the temperature of the room because I know how I feel about it. I know how I feel about how they kind of rank in my head, but I'm curious how they're stacking up for y'all. So if you want to rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, if you just want to say who do you think is the top one, throw it in the comments and we'll talk about it. But yeah, we're going to get into that in a second, and we're going to have sound from Abram. I think he's the only running back that we interviewed because he was the one who everyone wanted to ask why you weren't very good, Abram. why you put the ball on the ground, man? Why'd you do it?
It was kind of a weird moment too. After we had Dennis Allen and Andy Dalton at the podium, and then it was kind of like, wait a minute, we're past the COVID stuff. We do get to go to the locker room now, right? But that was the case. But the locker room everyone was clearing out, getting on the team bus and heading to the getting ready to go to the airport, obviously to fly back that night after the game. And so there weren't too many guys around and people scrambling to get out of there as well. Luckily we were able to get Abram Smith, and I felt, other than that unfortunate turnover, we finally got to see some of that, his dual threat ability too, his ability in the run game and the pass catching.
Everyone caught a pass, which I was impressed by. So yeah, we're gonna get into that. We haven't technically started the second segment yet, so don't get too excited. But I did want to mention this. He was a guy who I probably could have mentioned. The honorable mention is Justin Evans. I thought looked great. He's a guy who I think has a pretty safe spot in the roster. We talked about this kind of in our under the radar player segment a few episodes ago, because I do think that, like, especially now with Smoke Evans, with Smoke Monday and Bryce Thompson out of the equation, both got hurt, both are done for the year. It's his spot to lose. Maybe a guy like Daniel Sorensen could sneak in there, and you might keep both. But I thought he really showed himself well in that one. He had a really, really impressive play on an interception that DeMarcus Fields kind of tipped up in the air. So it's good to see him kind of getting back into it, because he, much like Chase Hansen, was a highly touted guy coming out of A&M, and he just could never stay healthy. So it's cool to see him back on the field.
Yeah, and that's another person during camp we've taken notice of and interested to see what he can do more in these games and proving himself. But I thought it was interesting too. You mentioned Daniel Sorensen, and there's definitely an air of confidence and about him. And I don't know,
Daniel, or about Justin?
Sorensen. I felt like there's definitely that confidence he exudes, at least when he's out there on the field, and what he does on special teams, I know is going to be key for his chance as a role on this squad as well.
Yeah, I think when he got signed, they were talking about how he was going to be in the Jeff Heath role, which I was like, man, I don't think anyone grows up as a kid wanting to say I'm going to be the Jeff Heath of the Saints, but you need that guy. So there's value there. We haven't talked about his special teams, and there's a lot of interesting things that happened on special teams, and he's right in there. But thanks for the comment, Reed. Good stuff. And here, I'll lead us back into the second segment here. We can talk about some running backs, because I love me some muscles. They're muscular guys. What can I say? Anyway. And we're back. We're going to talk about running backs. I'm excited about it. Steve, are you excited about it?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest battles we want to see this preseason, and we finally got it against another squad instead of just these practices against one another. And yeah, I don't think it was a disappointment against Houston. It was a good a measuring tool. I was surprised to see Dwayne Washington getting reps with that first team right away.
Yeah, if you were watching the second half of that game, I hope you were interested in the RB3 battle, because it was really one of the only things worth watching outside of maybe the offensive line. But yeah, so let's just kind of set up what happened, which You had all 4 running backs. They kind of came off in an order, and I think that order is really indicative of kind of how they went in and how they were viewed in the pecking order so far, which Dwayne Washington came off the bench first, and I was not expecting that. I was expecting to see maybe a Tony Jones, maybe a Divine Ezigbo, but it was Dwayne getting the first run at it, and he really had the run of the entire first quarter. He had that entire first drive. He ended up with 9 carries for 19 yards, which I think the yardage total is a little disappointing. It's about 2.1 yards per carry, but I think that when you look at him, he really is a good receiver out of the backfield, and that's where he made his impact felt. He had 3 catches, 18 yards, which is a team high, 3 catches. And one of those was that screen pass for a touchdown that I thought was really, really well executed by both the offensive line, Eric McCoy. I can't remember. Maybe it was Throckmorton out there. I can't remember who the other guy was. But Dwayne ran it really well. He was very patient. He got in the end zone, the only touchdown of the day. So he gets a lot of credit for that. I did think he kind of faltered a little as the game went on. He had a near fumble, which, in the preseason, a near fumble is still a fumble. And it doesn't hurt the team, but when you're going through tape, you're not going to miss that. He got lucky; it bounced back into his hands, but that's still kind of that's a negative check mark. And then on a 3rd and 1, he had a chance to really just plow. And I don't know if he was trying to stutter, but it looked like he kind of lost his feet and he just kind of fell, and that's not a good look. So after a really good start, I thought he kind of dropped a little bit in my eyes. Tony Jones Jr. came on next. 7 carries, 27 yards. He also had a catch for 13 yards, which, we've talked about his pass catching ability. He hasn't been perfect, but he looked good there. Then he kind of got the run until halftime. Next off the bench was Divine Ezigbo, who, I think he's the shiftiest of the backs. 8 carries, 26 yards. He had a couple catches, but he didn't really do much with it. I think he only had negative 1 yard receiving. And then Abram Smith kind of got the final run. He actually led the team in rushing at 7 attempts for 30 yards. He had that one nice catch out of the backfield, but that fumble, which really, 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 really is tough to see from a UDFA who's trying to fight for a roster spot. He's not going to get cut because he fumbled in the preseason opener, but it's now going to become a major point of emphasis and a teaching point, and he has to show that it's not going to be a thing. But so of those 4 running backs, who did you come away most impressed with, Steve?
I would say Tony Jones Jr. just for the fact that I thought all around I liked his game, getting those 3.9 yards a carry, 27 yards, and then he also chipped in the receiving game, which has been a big question, and I thought it was a nice 13-yard gain he had there. And he just seems a guy that he's running well. He seemed to have decent vision out there on the field, and I just feel like he knows, obviously he's got to prove more during these games, because we saw what he was able to do in training camp last year, and then come the regular season really vanished. And I know he had the ankle injury, but even after that, we didn't see much from him at all out of this running back group. And I know this is obviously important to him as well. I think we mentioned last time, he's got a 3rd kid now. He's trying to, I'm sorry, that's Dwayne Washington that's got the 3rd kid, and he's trying to make earn his role a little bit bigger. But with Tony Jones Jr., he has a lot of shiftiness, I feel like, that can go along with his power. Not so much power, but he's able to get those tough yards, and a guy that keeps fighting with the ball.
He's a guy, he's never struck me as a super fast runner. Like, I don't know if he's the most athletic runner out there, but he does get up to speed really quickly. And I think that's what helps him kind of be a kind of maniac in the hole when you're trying to tackle him and he's just bullying through you. I think there's a very specific talent there that is kind of hard to quantify. But he also had a couple kick returns, and I actually thought that he looked good on those kick returns. And that's a good example of like that kind of short area quickness that I think he has. But yeah, I came away kind of, I don't know if I was most impressed with Tony Jones, but I was most surprised by Tony Jones because I did not expect to be that impressed, much like last year when I didn't expect to be that impressed with him in camp, and he ended up beating out Latavius Murray for that RB2 spot. the guy, and they all kind of do things well, right? So if I'm kind of ranking it right now, I'm putting kind of Dwayne and Tony neck and neck for that, like at the top. Then I'm putting Divine next on the next line down, and then I'm putting Abram on the next line down. And I think that's not a terrible place for Abram to be. He still has time to kind of ascend, because I think that when you kind of look at the structure of the team and you look at what's going to be needed out of that RB3 spot, which is like, okay, maybe Kamara misses a couple games. You need to either fill in behind Mark Ingram or fill in on the early downs. And if you think Dwayne can do that, then I think the second running back you keep is Abram Smith, because you don't have to trust him early on if you think you can trust Dwayne. If you don't think you can trust Dwayne as that RB3, then I don't think you can keep Abram, because you need someone who you can put in that role that has a skill set that you trust. And I think that would have to be maybe a Divine Azigbo or Tony Jones. Now, one thing that Divine did that may not have gotten as much of attention, but I think is very important, he had 2 special teams tackles. I think they only had 5 in the game. And that role, that RB3 role, is going to have to play special teams. That's why Dwayne's going to make the roster, because he's going to be a special teams ace. And that next name on the list is going to have to contribute there as well. So I think, while Divine, I don't think stood out and did anything spectacular in the run game, although, like I said, I think he is the shiftiest runner. He's the best at making people miss in the hole. I think that if he can be a contributor on special teams, then that is a big check mark in his column.
And I think for Azigbo too, I'm interested to see if come this game against Green Bay, if he does get elevated maybe to the ones to give him that opportunity as well, instead of being put in later in the game when some of the second and third guys are in.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we all know, that position's got to catch too. And I think Divine, every one of them showed they can catch. Big Irv says, yeah, it's 4 backs for 1 spot. I disagree with that. I think it's 4 backs for 2 spots, but one of those spots is going to be 3 backs
for 1 spot.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, so it's 3 backs for 1 spot. It's 4 backs for 2, but like Dwayne's going to be there no matter what. So it's kind of, you're splitting hairs, but I do think there is a difference, because 2 of those guys are going to make it. It's not just 1. And Big Irv thinks it's going to be Abram. And I think that there's still a really good chance that it is Abram. If he can prove that was kind of a one-off and that fumble at the goal line. And here's what he had to say about it when he was asked in the locker room, if I can find it here.
Sorry, I've been looking at my phone, checking myself in for Green Bay.
All right, here's that.
I'm finally here, and this is what I'm doing. And the jitters came, but D-Wash and Tony Jones, they kind of just helped me, like, hey, shake it. Your first big hit, first hit, whatever it might be, just shake it, and that's exactly what I did. So, like you said, first big game, but had a little bit of jitters, and it kind of just all went away.
What advice did they give you after the fumble? Did any of the veterans come up to you right away?
Yeah, just told me to shake it off, kind of like everybody does. Big brother type of mentality is what they did to me, and just shake it off. You learn, everybody has their days, so you just got to go back and bounce back and practice. And at the end of the day, nobody's perfect, but we're all going to work to be perfect.
Just kind of pitching the right spot.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where you end up. It was not. I think Dwayne's fumble was actually more concerning because it wasn't like a great defensive play that caused it. Even though he got it back, I still think it was a little more concerning because, I think that's a learning point for Abram. I don't think at the college level you have guys as well equipped to just punch the ball out the way the Texans defender did there. And, that's a moment where it's like, yeah, you got to have 2 hands on the ball. You can tell somebody that all day long. Now it's going to be burned into his brain. He's like, got to have 2 hands on the ball at the goal line, because fumbling there it's not just a turnover. You are taking points off the board. That's at least 3 points, probably 7, because he's set them up of like 2nd and 1 or 2nd and goal at the 1. And, that's just something you can't have happen. I think there's some concern like, now they're going to cut him, but it's like, he's not going to get cut because of that play. He's going to get cut if he comes out next week and he's in his own head and he fumbles again, or he doesn't get anything done because he's trying to be too sure with the ball, and he doesn't see a hole, and he's late on some plays and some assignments. So like that's where, it now adds a hurdle that might not have existed before because it's a concern in your mind that you didn't have before. But I think that he's got the right approach, and I think he'll bounce back, like you said.
And yeah, this is going to be obviously another big game for him on Friday night. But these joint practices with the Packers, I'll definitely anxious to see how he responds there because it's going to be a lot different not going up against the Saints defense this week.
Yeah, and I won't be out at those practices, but you're going to have to let me know if I have a feeling he's going to be walking around the facility in the hotel with a ball like this.
Yeah.
Like nonstop. Maybe even like the Tiki Barber, like high and tight kind of deal.
I just want to know with Abram Smith, though, like I want to see that linebacker mentality we've talked about, we've said of him. I want to see him truck somebody and absolutely knock them off their feet. And he's got that small fire hydrant type of body, I guess you could say. Not very tall, but a thick running back. And he's another one too that has, I guess you would say, sneaky breakaway speed. He doesn't really have you wouldn't consider him a fast running back, but if he gets out into the open, Abram Smith, he's just a guy that I see you could pull away. And I just want to see more something like that from him, instead of just talking about what he did at Baylor. I want to see more of it happening on the field now for the Saints.
Yeah, he needs to step forward, and I think he's going to get his chance. I'd like to see him run behind the first team offensive line if that's possible.
Yeah.
That's the thing when you look at the second half of these preseason games. It's kind of disadvantage on disadvantage where you have your second team or your third team offensive line going against the backups to the backups on the other side. So it's like, it can be a mirage at times because you're breaking tackles against people who aren't going to make the roster, and that's why I give a little more credence to what Dwayne did in the first quarter. He's going against, maybe not the entire first team, but he's going up against NFL starting caliber players. So I am interested to see if, we're kind of talking about the order that they came out in as if that's kind of set in stone. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that kind of flip on Friday because of that, because it's not necessarily about, okay, this is the order and this is where they're going to come out in. It's like, okay, well, we saw what you look like against the first team offensive line. Let's see how maybe Tony does, or maybe Devine, or maybe Abram. So I think that's something that I'm interested to hear from Dennis Allen throughout the week, because he wouldn't really tell us any insight into, what the first team guys are going to be ahead of this game. But I think he's going to have to be a little more open about kind of the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 approach in against the Packers, especially because they're going to be going against them in practice.
I'm going to have to rewatch that tape because Reed's saying up here that Abram Smith did truck somebody on an 8-yard run last night.
Yeah, he looked strong. He ran well. He had some really nice runs, and Da said that too. He ran behind his pads. He ran strong, but I mean, you can do a lot of good things, and this is what Da said specifically. You can do a lot of good things, but if you put the ball on the ground, it's a major negative. And if it becomes a thing, if it becomes a point where you can't be trusted to hold on to the ball, it's really hard to keep you around. And so that's just going to be his job. But I think that he's going to be fine, and we're going to learn a lot more about this room, and maybe be able to trim a name off of that list next week.
Yeah, I don't know, because yet to me there wasn't that big of a separation. I thought still from the three guys. I'm still not putting Dwayne Washington in that mix just because we've talked about his role is pretty much solidified with the team. Even if it isn't the number 3 running back, he's still going to have a role on special teams. But if any of these other guys between Abram or a Zigbo or Jones Jr., that it's still up in the air for me. I can't. That's too close to call right now, that race.
Roy Jones Jr. I just enjoy saying Zigbo so much that it's going to be a bummer. But I think that if anyone fell, it was probably him. Just because I didn't see the explosiveness. Like, he's a big guy, but he doesn't run big. Like, he doesn't run like a strong guy. He's the biggest running back of that group. He is the biggest and the heaviest, but he doesn't run like that. Like, we saw more powerful runs from Tony and from Abram, and we saw Divine kind of trying to jitterbug his way around, which works at times, and sometimes it doesn't. When it does work, it looks really, really nifty and exciting. When it doesn't, you're talking like 2-3 yard loss, and that's where I think Divine kind of loses it for me, because it's like, you're a big dude, you just got to put your shoulder into somebody and just get 2-3 yards.
But you did mention his shiftiness too. You mentioned his shiftiness too with his Zigbo, and I thought there was, I think it was in the third quarter, a run. It might have been the fourth, but it was like a 6 or 7 yard gain, and he made a real nice move to make the defenders look foolish. And I'm just anxious to see more of him with a first team kind of offense, to give him a shot and not, like I said, completely write him off. The other guys, they did their job as well, but I can't give you that pecking order. To me, is still obviously not set. And then this week with Green Bay is going to be big, and obviously the next 2 games as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I think when I say we might be able to eliminate a name, it's going to end up probably being because, okay, maybe Mark Ingram gets some reps in the second game, and you'll still only have 4 names, and one guy doesn't get in. One guy's only on special teams, and that's going to be an indicator that they're starting to separate. But yeah, that's going to be. I think that's where we can wrap that up, because there's only so much we can say. We've talked so much about the running backs, but it's always going to be the interesting battle, and I think that Abram's going to be fine. But he needs to clean it up. He needs to figure that out. He needs to hold on to the darn ball, and we'll get it done.
I want to know what his mom's going to tell him, because she said, be the hammer, not the nail.
Yeah, he was both. He was both last night. But that's going to be it for that segment. Again, you're listening to Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller. If you haven't already, make sure to head over to wherever your podcast, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Overcast. That's also a weather system. And hit the subscribe button, give us a 5-star review, give us a rating and a review, and let us know, what we're doing that you hate, what we're doing that you like, what we can do differently. And we'll try to take that seriously.
We're actually on the Odyssey app now too.
We're on the Odyssey app. That's so exciting. The company we work for has finally put us on their own app. Go check it out. We're going to come back, and I'm going to try to talk you off the cliff about Trevor Penning for a while. We're going to hit on some more news and notes from the week as we get into the next week of the preseason. Stick around. All right. I don't think we need to go to commercial here unless you really want to break.
No, I'm good.
Okay, guys. Exciting. We're back. Nothing's changed. All right.
We have our first big
mean.
fan here.
Murtis is being mean. It's good to see you, Murtis. I'm a fan of you.
I'm definitely not.
It's all right, guys. I'm tired. It's all right. I was up till like 3 a.m. last night pretending to work.
Pretending.
Okay. So, Steve, let's, if you want to lead us in on Trevor, and we can kind of go from there, or just kind of tee it up on Trevor and we can kind of figure it out.
Yeah, I think with Trevor Penning, a lot of folks.
I meant the intro, like intro the segment.
Oh, okay. We're back here for another segment on Inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak, gearing up for another talk about our favorite quote unquote bad guy on the team. The guy that I think everybody expects to get on a fight every time he's on the field now. He's just throwing punches and pushing people around and causing havoc. The 19th overall pick in the draft. So he's got high expectations, and I get it from folks. But I know what you were mentioning before. A lot of folks are already on that cliff with Trevor Penning. He had a mixed bag of a game last night, and that's to be expected in the preseason. And we all know coming into this game, he's known for his run blocking and his mauler up front, and has issues in the passing game. And that's exactly what played out yesterday. But I think the overall of Penning was more positive than the negative. And it's just unfortunate that obviously those negative plays that stand out, and maybe because they happen so close to each other.
Yeah, I think, it's funny when you talk about linemen, it's always tough because as it's just human nature when they have bad moments, you remember them. And the broadcast talks about them and their name is all over the airwaves, and all of a sudden, it's another bad rep and another bad rep. And all of a sudden there's this idea that, wow, he had a terrible game. I rewatched the game this morning and I spent a lot of time looking specifically at Trevor Penning, and I didn't think he played that bad, guys. I really didn't. I think that he played well in the run game, and he had a few really tough reps that got away from him late in the first half. And I think that, he was pretty honest about kind of that, what might have happened there at the end, after the game. And here's what he had to say. Oh, where was it?
It was good. I think I got a little gas there at the end, but that's expected. I mean, first game since February, so, and even then I played a couple snaps, only played like 20 snaps. So really, first game since about December. So it was good to be back out there again and get basically full game in.
Yeah, I don't think he's making an excuse there. I think it's just reality. It was the first game. He got a lot of reps, and I think that when you look at when his struggles came, they came late in the first half on that last drive where he probably thought he was done. He probably thought he was heading in for halftime, and all of a sudden you're back out there for that kind of last, that 2-minute drill, and, a couple reps got away from him. Then they come back after halftime, and I think he was probably still in his head about those reps before halftime, and he let a couple more get away from him. So those 4 reps were rough, but the consistency is probably the thing that you need to get to the most. And I think that throughout the rest of the game, he held up well. You didn't hear his name called a lot. He was in for most of the game. James Hurst, I think, went out after the first series, and he took a majority of the reps the rest of the way. So when you're talking about, okay, did I hear him get his name called out all the time? No, not really. I mean, in the run game, I thought he held up well. In the pass game, there was a lot of good reps there, and you just got to build on those. But I don't think that he was nearly as bad as kind of the initial reaction off of the game because of those plays coming in such close proximity to each other. And if you believe in the PFF ratings, he was the top-rated rookie in week 1 of the preseason.
I was very surprised to see that. Like I said, I didn't think he had an awful night, but I wouldn't put him. I guess not seeing all the other games either. It's kind of amazing that he's the highest ranked first round pick by PFF.
Yeah, and I mean, take it for what you will. I don't swear by those ratings either, but the fact is, an independent party said that they watched these games and believed that he was the best player, the best rookie in week 1 of the preseason. So take that for what it is. I think that he has a lot he needs to work on, and I think that he is not the week 1 starter. I think James Hurst kind of put his stamp on that. But when I went back and watched his reps, I was not nearly as concerned about, his kind of long-term viability and his ability to become a starting tackle in the NFL as I might have been coming right off the game last night. So, if anyone wants to rewatch the game and have it out with me, I'm on Twitter. I'll talk about it. But I think that when you kind of look at the larger picture of what he did, it wasn't nearly as bad as it seemed.
Yeah, and I mean, this is going to be interesting for him to go into Green Bay now against the defense that's pretty good, and they're going to be a big challenge for him in these joint practices, which will be great leading up to the game. And those moments that he did struggle last night, though, is what surprises me of why PFF had him ranked so high. Though I can't understand how they break that down exactly.
Yeah, they gave him a 90 rating, which feels way too high. Like, I agree, because those moments that he struggled, they were significant. They were not like, and I think that's where it kind of feels like the larger picture of what he did is worse than it was, because those struggle points were so clear, especially in close proximity to each other, that, like, how do you end up with a 90 rating if you let your quarterback get blown up even 2-3 times throughout a game? Like, that should be enough to bring you down. That's why I question those ratings a little bit. But just the fact is, there is a party out there that watched this and graded it and felt like it was a lot higher than most people probably think. So just take that for what it is. And, I thought that if you go back, the very specific play that I thought was a good indicator was the third down conversion to Dejon Dixon, where, he just stonewalled the guy. The touchdown that should have been to Traquan Smith, where he didn't, he was a brick wall, and there's going to be learning points. There's going to be learning curves. He's talked about the technique that he's had to pick up that he just didn't have at Northern Iowa. It's not necessarily a surprise because, you're coming out of the FCS ranks where he could just bully people. And now he's got to make sure that his power is not being wasted because his technique is off. And that's kind of a lot what he's talked about thus far. And again, I don't think that I'm just saying the concern over whether he can be the long-term left tackle is way premature. Because like I said, James Hurst is going to be the week 1 starter. I don't need Trevor to be ready to be a starting left tackle week 1. I need Trevor to be ready if he's needed in his rookie season. If James Hurst goes down, he needs to be able to come in and be consistent, show the high points of what he did last night across the board and not have those very glaring breakdowns. And he knows that. He's going to work on that. But that's what preseason is for. And the fact is, this is his first NFL game. You expect some troubles. That's part of the reason, you talk about, you didn't want Andy Dalton in there. Part of the reason you don't want Andy Dalton in there is because you're trying out Landon Young and Trevor Penning at right and left tackle. You go in knowing there's a good chance the quarterback might be running for his life, right? That's all part of the process.
I get it, though, with the concern from fans and whoever, just because when you're taking 19th overall, I mean, there's obviously high expectations with him, but thinking he's going to be this all-pro right off the bat is a little out of reach. I want to definitely see more improvement in this Green Bay week leading up to the game and also the game as well. He's talked about his hands are his biggest thing. And being able to, in the pass protection is the biggest issue. We know he's going to be this guy that's physical and tough and all over you in the run game. But if you can't pass protect, that's going to be a huge issue.
Yeah, no, it is. And Reed Wilson seems to think we're forgetting their third stringers. Well, they weren't third stringers on the second drive of the game. That was the first team offense for the Texans, or whatever the first team offense of it was at that point, right? So he was out there a majority of the game. And that's why, when he says he was gassed, I think that's probably a factor in why the struggles kind of cropped up late in the first half. And, I'm not trying to plaster over the fact that he struggled at points in that game. I'm just trying to point out that there were positive things to bring out of that. This is the first NFL experience for a guy. He's got to learn. He's got to pick it up. His last NFL game came at Northern Iowa. This is a bit of a step up in competition. So there's things he's going to learn, he's going to pick up. But if you go back to minicamp, if you go back to OTAs, I was way more concerned back then in what he was going to look like when he went against NFL competition, because he looked rough with his technique and with his ability to kind of move people. And I thought particularly in the run game, he was impressive. So take that for what it is. I'm just telling you that I'm not going to jump off a cliff with Trevor Penning quite yet. And I think that if down the road, we're going to understand why this guy was a first round pick.
I think it was the second quarter when he got, how do you pronounce the guy's name? Or Karambu or on the Texans. And put a spin move on him and dropped him to the ground. And it was a bit embarrassing. I thought that was probably his worst rep of the night.
Yeah. Well, no, his worst rep of the night was the one that came. I can't remember if it was first or second down. It was on that drive right before halftime. And he tried to set outside. He got a little too antsy. And then the defensive end kind of cut back inside. And he has this really bad habit of overreacting in that moment and grabbing the guy and throwing him. Well, you can do that if you were planning to throw him away from your quarterback. This was kind of like a flashback to the Senior Bowl where he threw somebody right at Desmond Ritter's legs. It's what he did to Ian Book on that rep, and he got taken down by that guy. And that's one thing that he really needs to cut out of his game. Like, you get beat, you can't compound that mistake. I'd rather see you hold a guy, which is what he did after halftime. But, those are things he's going to have to clean up. But again, like I said, it's a rookie in his first NFL preseason game. If you expected him to be perfect, I think you were always going to be set up for disappointment. And I was expecting to go back through the tape. This is all I'm saying. I was expecting to go back through the tape and just watch rep after rep after rep. I was like, oh my gosh, again. But that wasn't the case. Right. I saw a very, a good number of positive pass blocking reps. There were a few where it was close, where it was a competition, it was a battle, but he did enough. And that's where I think you're going to see more of that as we go forward. I think, and this week against the Packers is going to be a great test. This is a great pass rush that they have, and we're going to have to see it from him.
What's funny is, and I know he didn't get as nearly as much reps as Trevor Penning, but there hasn't been any outcry or panic over Chris Olave's just 1 catches for 4 yards.
No, you're right. Yeah. I mean, I think that it'll get louder if we get, into week 3 and we're still only seeing, 1 or 2 catches. But it's the preseason gets so frustrating for me because I think people get worked up about the wrong things where it's like, okay, you want to see the first team offense be effective. It was. You want to see the first team defense be effective. It was. You want to see young players, finding their way. You want to see them, week 1, there's nothing to improve on. This is your baseline if you're a rookie player. This is your first tape. Now you're going to go back. You're going to watch the tape. You're going to see, okay, these are the things I need to improve on, and then it's going to be on them to improve upon them, right? So if you're overreacting to what you saw in week 1 of the preseason, I mean, you're not even giving a guy a chance to see the trouble points and then move on from them. It's not like they've been playing games at the NFL level. We don't know. We only saw him at the FCS level. So if the concern is what we saw last night, then, you need to figure that out and pick it up. But the positive thing for the Saints is that I thought James Hurst looked very solid, and I have no concern about him being the week 1 starter. So Trevor's going to have time to figure it out. And we're going to have to see how that goes. But for right now, I'm okay with it.
Even you talk about with the offensive line, a little off track there. I thought Andrus Peat was actually pretty impressive last night, supporting the run game.
And they're all healthy.
Right.
We haven't heard any, by this point last year, there was at least 3-4 injuries. So, hopefully this is a sign that new training staff is really kind of figuring things out. And I mean, Traquan Smith is still healthy. Andrus Peat is still healthy. These are guys who are never healthy. So that's a positive. Anytime you can get through a preseason game and not have lost a key contributor, I say it was a positive result.
Yeah, you hear everybody, what's the biggest thing you want from the preseason? Obviously, all your guys to stay healthy. And for a big bulk, the Saints, we saw Chase Hansen take a shot in the looked like he lost his wind a little bit and was in the injury tent very briefly and came back out and was still productive. Other than that, there wasn't anything too much that happened to this team. Hopefully, coming out of that and going into the Green Bay week, we see some guys coming back to this team that haven't played. Some of the young guys that didn't play last night, I was surprised not to see even like a Lucas Kroll. We didn't see Alontae Taylor. We know he's dealing with a hip issue. Definitely want to see them in some game action or even in the joint practices. Another guy is second-year linebacker Pete Werner. I'm definitely he would be on the top of my concern list with injuries just because we know groin injuries can linger and are very a big issue for a linebacker who has to move side to side.
Yeah, and that's why, a guy like Chase Hansen stepping up, hopefully Andrew Dowell, guys like that, you're going to need them to be contributors. And I still think you're going to end up seeing them bring in at least 1 or 2 more names at linebacker. Eric Wilson's another name who could be in a big role. But okay, I was going to say something and I forgot what it was. Oh, okay. So Randy Major here. Where would you guys rank our defense after last night going into the regular season? I'm glad you asked this because I think we did not talk about Paulson Adebo enough at the top of the show. And Paulson Adebo has been a star in camp. And I think it was fair to wonder how that might translate to a real game, right? With the physicality, can he get away with that level of physicality in a game? Is he going to get flagged constantly? And what we saw last night, yeah. I mean, it worked. He actually drew an offensive pass interference against, I can't remember who the receiver was, but it was downfield. And it was on a play where, the DB is at a disadvantage. Marcus May came up and he got sent on a blitz. I believe it was PJ Williams in deep center, playing that deep safety. And so you have Paulson Adebo playing press man on the outside. He's on an island. Davis Mills sees that. He sees the pressure. He makes the right read, and he throws a 50-50 ball. And, and Paulson Adebo was a blanket. He had no chance to catch that ball. He actually did catch the ball, but it was because he took his arm and shoved him out of the way so he could catch it, and he still came down out of bounds. But PJ Williams also got over the top. And if these are the guys who you can't complete a pass against, if you can't attack that matchup, who are you attacking? You're going at Marshawn on the opposite side of the field. You're going at CJ in the slot. You're trying to sneak something in under Tyrann Mathieu deep. I mean, this defense, assuming the run stuffers do their job, which, as we talked about, they didn't last night. But again, you didn't have Onyemata or Cam Jordan in there. I mean, this defense has a chance to be scary good. I don't know. I don't know how I could rank it, just because I'm guessing at the relative talent levels of so many NFL teams that I haven't watched yet, right? Like, gauging a defense is a lot harder than gauging an offensive skill set, because you can kind of say, okay, skill player, quarterback, and that's a good offense. But this has a chance to be the best defense in the NFL. I don't know if they will be, but from a talent level perspective, if you can't throw the ball and you can just load up against the run, I mean, they're going to be good.
Yeah, we know it's a passing league, and you rattle off all those names that this team has in the secondary. And another guy we didn't see last night, Marcus May. He did play, actually.
We did see Marcus May for a few snaps, and we saw Bradley Roby starting across from Paulson Adebo. Bradley Roby, former Texan, so it was kind of a homecoming game for him. He's a guy who probably won't even be on the starting line. He would be starting for, I would guess, a majority of NFL teams. He's probably going to be the CB3. Alontae Taylor, a second-round pick, is going to be premium depth at the cornerback position. So, I mean, you're in a situation where you could have guys go down with injuries, and the guys you're bringing in are, starting caliber players. And that's just, I mean, the talent level is insane on this defense. And the only questions I have are at the will linebacker spot. And I think you can figure that out. If you have to figure anything out, I think that's the position you can figure it out.
And then you talk about health too. The concern, obviously, on the defensive end, I just want to see Cam Jordan have some consistent support on the other side of him, between Davenport, another guy who didn't play last night, and with Peyton Turner. I want to see more of, being a game factor instead of just a practice guy.
Yeah, and Reed Wilson is a good point. And we'll get out of here soon. But, Paulson Adebo, I don't know if he would have been a first-round pick, but he would have been in consideration to be a first-round pick, no question. It would have been I think it would have depended on what he did in that kind of final year at Stanford for where he would have gone. But there was definitely a potential to work up into the first round, but he opted out, and the Saints kind of stole him in the third round of last year's draft. And I think it's gonna end up going down as another one of these incredible third round draft picks that the Saints have, because you go back and it's like that's where they get the majority of their star draft picks. Michael Thomas was a second rounder, that's a rare one, but Jimmy Graham was a third rounder, Akeem Hicks was a third rounder, I think Teron Armstead was a third rounder, Alvin Kamara was a third rounder. There's probably one that I'm missing, but then Paulson Adebo. So if this defense holds up, this is that's why when I say, like, the national kind of media on the subject always tries to discount the Saints because of Jameis Winston. And I kind of respond to that, like, if the defense is good enough, all the quarterback has to do is play the right way, and you can get deep into the playoffs. Jimmy Garoppolo made a Super Bowl, right? And now the 49ers are trying to move on from him, but, like, he got them there, right? So it's not a question of whether you can, it's a question of, okay, can you complement the defense? Not can you win in spite of the defense? And that's what was asked of Drew Brees for so long. If Drew Brees had this defense at his peak, if you're talking 2014 Drew Brees with this defense, I don't even know. I mean, it would have been a bloodbath. And so you're just looking to Jameis to be consistent, and I think he can be that.
Yeah, we're hoping that, and we know he has a tweaked foot, which ends up being we found out
Whatever
a
the heck
sprained foot
that
for
means.
him. Yeah, and I'm interested to see what comes of him this week in Green Bay and leading up to the game. If he does end up practicing, will we see him in action, or do they hold him off to the preseason finale? It's kind of weird now with 3 games on, how you gauge where you're playing the bulk of your starters here.
Yeah. And I think we're going to end up seeing. I still don't think we're going to see Jameis. Even if Jameis is healthy, I'd be surprised if we see him in this game. Just because I think the third preseason game now is much more attractive to get those guys in there because you don't have to worry about, okay, we're going right into week 1. You have that open week.
Yeah.
So I think if we see Jameis, it'll be week 3. I don't know if we'll see Mike Thomas. I don't know if we'll see a lot of these guys, but we're not going to have much time to wonder. It's going to be right on us on Friday. Another 7:00 start. They have 3 7:00 starts in the preseason and 3 7:00 starts in the regular season.
We're
So,
prime time preseason action, baby.
Yeah, that prime time. We have 2 Friday night starts coming at you. But I think that's going to wrap it up on this episode of Inside Black and Gold. I know Steve needs to he needs to unpack his bag from Houston and then pack it so he can go out to Green Bay. Yeah, doesn't have a lot of time. I'm going to be here roughing it out with y'all in the humidity. You can see that my hair has gotten gradually more wet because my air conditioner is not doing the job. So I've just been sweating this whole time. But it's been important to me to keep talking and not spend the entire time trying to fix my air conditioning. So this was for you.
I appreciate it. You know what? And I actually told my wife before the podcast, please drop the air because it was getting stuffy in my office. I'm cooling here at a nice 74.
Yeah, see, I don't have an assistant to help me out with the conditions in my house. All I have is a barking dog downstairs. But as always, thanks for everyone who listened. Make sure to hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a review, give us a rating, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't. Follow Steve over at Steve Geller, WWL. He's going to be out at Packers camp this week, so you'll be able to get a lot of updates from him. You can follow me over at Jeff Nowak. I'm sorry, at Jeff_Nowak. I'll just be tweeting my random musings about why I love Trevor Penning and he's the best tackle of all time, right? Because that's basically the argument I made in this podcast, or at least that's what people will tell me it was. But that's all. Thanks so much for everyone watching on YouTube, everyone who listens, and peace, y'all.
Bring the pain against the Packers.
There you go. That's I'm going to cut what I said, and I'm going to use yours.
Cut it.
And that's the beauty of podcasts. Only the people on YouTube realize how clumsy we are at this. Once it gets on the podcast, it sounds like we're great. I actually was at a live podcast. On Friday, I went to see How Did This Get Made, which, if you don't listen to that podcast, is fantastic. It's Paula Shear, June Diane Raphael, and guy from the league. What's his name? He was in Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
I don't know. I haven't seen that either.
Oh, it's gonna bug me if I don't remember it. Jason Mantzoukas. And that was I get really bored at podcast. Like, I've been to a few live podcasts and I've gotten really bored at a lot of them, but they did such a great job engaging with the audience in portions of the show that aren't even going to be in it. And I think that's like when you do live stuff, and that's what I'm kind of learning as we get through this, is like engaging with the actual like YouTube audience, the people who are paying attention and asking questions is so important. So
definitely a lot of fun.
I'm sorry if you feel ignored over there. I'm trying not to, but I really do appreciate everyone who sticks around and lets me rant for however long it takes. Do you have anything you want to say, Steve, before we kick everyone out of here?
No, I'm going to do a little bit of laundry, do some packing. I think it's going to be a lot more intense work you're going to get in these joint practice. I love them. I know Lovie Smith says he's not a fan of the Houston Texans coach because he feels it's a lot of, fighting and trash talk, whatever going on. But to me, the work that goes on in the joint practices is much better than the preseason because you can, you get reps going on each other in those position groups.
Yeah. And this won't be in the podcast, but Daryl Hall says, y'all ain't making the playoffs as long as Big Brady and the boys in the division. Last I checked, Tom Brady was like on a golf course somewhere. Is he even still on the Bucs?
Yeah, he took a hiatus for whatever reason.
He's just gone. With that,
And,
like you all want to
how
get
many
you all want to get concerned about Trevor Penning. I would get concerned if my quarterback just up and left midway through training camp. That seems like a bad thing.
who had retired initially before the season started.
Right. He already retired once. Halfway through camp, he's like, my offensive line is all dead. Oh no, what am I gonna do? I guess I'm gonna go on a boat, wherever the heck he is.
Yeah,
He's
I'm
like,
having personal
I was
issues.
trying to
I
get
gotta
away
go.
from my family, but I guess I'll go back to him because y'all aren't helping me out very much. But yeah, I that's gonna be fascinating to see. And if it ends up being Kyle Trask, Marcus Mariota, and Baker Mayfield as the starting quarterbacks in the NFC
Feeling
South,
pretty good.
I think
if
the
it's
Saints are
those
in
three.
decent shape.
Yeah.
Oh man, Gronk is back. I don't know about that.
Nah.
Maybe that's where Tom went. Tom was like, guys, I gotta go, and he like went to go find Gronk at whatever nightclub he's been hanging out, and he's like, you gotta come back. I miss you.
We got Daryl saying no Breeze, no Peyton. Y'all done.
Daryl, where have you been my whole life? This would have been fun to talk about on the podcast. He waited until we were done with the podcast before he started coming in with these fire takes. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're not wrong. There's no Breeze and there's no Peyton, but we'll see.
Yeah,
The Bucks have like the worst winning percentage of any team in like the history of the NFL. So
I will
you
say,
win some, you
I'm
lose most.
guessing Las Vegas pretty much agreed with Daryl. That's why.
Well, I don't know what's happened to your internet connection, Steve, but you're frozen and you're making a funny face. So I think that's where we can end it. Thanks for everyone for giving us comments. Thanks, Daryl, for chiming in. I love you. We'll see y'all later in the week. I think we're going to have to record with Steve on location, so that'll be fun. I don't know what that's going to look like, but it'll be a good time. And as always, thanks so much for everyone, and be easy, y'all.